Hey, Heather.
Hi, happy Monday, and what a nice surprise to see Jackie. Hi.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to learn things about this committee.
Well, we are in a good position with you here. That's a real asset. So, um, Annika, how's everybody doing on your end?
Things are going well. Yeah, spent all day so far in that leaf listening session from MDA. Yeah, very interesting. Hey, Ben.
Before I think folks are rolling in, but just letting you all know, I got a couple messages back from bill sponsors, but I don't anticipate anybody will be hopping on. So
Gotcha.
probably nothing beyond what you already have to share, Ben, but just I'll note in the chat box which sponsors I heard from, but in case people have follow-up questions they want us to check in about.
Great, thanks.
I agree, Agar.
Okay, we can just give it one more minute as people start to trickle in. But if you would like to, you can go ahead and put your name and organization in the chat for our introduction. And so everyone knows this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the council's website as soon as possible. Okay, everyone. My name is Annika Lefebvre. I'm the Food Systems Resilience Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and this is the weekly Communication and Coordination Committee meeting for the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to those who have already started putting their names and organizations in the chat. We don't have too many announcements today, but as a quick reminder before I forget, there will not be a meeting next week due to the President's Day holiday. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather to say her hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. I'm Heather Bruskin. I'm an appointed member of the FSRC, and as Annika shared, the chair of the Communications and Coordination Committee. I'm also the director of the Montgomery County Office of Food Systems Resilience. It is, as you've probably seen on today's agenda, a very busy time in the General Assembly. And last week, the bills were dropping fast and furious, so there's a lot to cover today. Special appreciation to Ben and Annette for all the work that they are doing to keep us on top of the food system related bills. We do have a few more than usual today to cover because we will not be meeting next Monday and want to make sure that we're focusing on those with upcoming hearings so that you can take this information and inform your organizational and agency efforts at weighing in with testimony or just for enriching the conversation with questions that you might have about the bills. Just letting you all know, we typically reach out in advance of these meetings to the sponsors of the bills, just to invite them to share any additional information and also to start the conversation if questions come up today that we can follow up and solicit some additional information from them. So just want to make sure you know we're really intentionally trying to foster those relationships with the legislators so that we can provide some clarity and transparency always in the bill making process. So I will turn it over to Ben to walk us through all of our bills of focus today. Thanks, Ben.
And just a quick reminder here, there are several FSRC meetings coming up, and you can access them on the council's website. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you, everybody, and happy Monday. Hope everybody is enjoying the one nice day this week before we're all probably going to be stuck in the snow. And without further ado, I will get started. Pointing you again to our legislative tracking resources, we added a lot of bills last week. Last week was the bill introduction deadline in both the House and the Senate. So we had a lot of FSRC related bills that came down the pike that we put in our tracking sheet. There's also a link here to the committee meeting calendar or the committee hearing calendar, which is certainly filling up, which is why we're taking on a greater number of bills in today's session than we usually do. And without further ado, I will get into the bills. First one is Senate Bill 703, House Bill 881. The Senate hearing on this bill is coming up next week on the 19th. A House hearing has not yet been scheduled. So this is the Family Investment Program and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Benefits Child Support Bill. So it changes the current statute to state that any child support collected in a month, regardless of the amount of child support obtained and the number of children in the household, shall not be considered as income for the computation of FIP assistance, and that any local department may not consider any child support that a household collects in a month to count towards supplemental benefits for SNAP. So I will pause there and see if we have anybody on the call who wants to ask questions or who has comments on this legislation. Any questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Seeing none, I will move on to the next bill. So this is a Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program Alterations Bill. No House crossfile. This is just a Senate bill so far. Senate Bill 789. Hearing is coming up on the 21st in the Senate. So this removes the current limitation that only public institutions could be designated as hunger-free campuses. The Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program will now apply to any 2- or 4-year institution of higher education or regional institution of higher education center that meets the bill's requirements and is eligible to participate in the program. There is also a mandatory appropriation in this bill. So it extends the current appropriation through fiscal year 2026, which is $150,000. And then starting in fiscal year 2027, it increases the mandatory appropriation for the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program to $250,000 per fiscal year. Then there's this last provision that frankly has confused us a little bit, but there seems to be a carve out that notwithstanding a designation as a hunger-free campus or 2- or 4-year institution, anything operated by a private nonprofit institution of higher education is not eligible to receive grant funding under the program. So it singles out an institution operated by a private nonprofit institution. And I see we have a hand raised.
Yeah, hi, Ben. This is Ann Wallerstedt from, oh, my camera's not on, the Maryland Food Bank. That's basically allowing private schools to opt in and get the designation of a hunger-free campus, though they're still not eligible just under the statute for the grant dollars for basically the reason that it's such a small pool that we want to continue it as it is. And if more money is able to be added, we're able to expand it.
Gotcha. That is a very helpful clarification. Thank you, Ann.
Sure.
With that, any questions on Senate Bill 789?
And Ben, I'll note this currently doesn't have a crossfile. Is that right?
That is correct.
It's like Annika.
Annika?
Yeah, sorry. So I guess, Anne, for clarification, are you saying that the rest of the bill text exists already, like as it's written for public institutions, like with regard to all of the like food insecurity, like communications type programs and like resource coordination, and it would just be extending it to eligible private universities?
No. So, yeah, that's okay. So basically, and not basically, literally all this bill does is increase funding for the program. And then it allows any private college, university, institute of higher education to get the title, like the designation, hunger-free campus, if they meet all the qualifications of the hunger-free campus program, but they're not eligible for the funding as of yet because it's such a small bucket. And this program's been around since, don't quote me on it, 2020, 2021, 2019, somewhere around there. The goal really is to keep it going as long as you can. And if the budget gods, probably it'd be able to be open to more.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, the first section of the bill, all it does is removes the word public from basically every sentence. So like it used to say public institution of higher education. The public has been removed. But then I think, Anne, you were helpful in getting me to understand this. In the funding portion of the bill, it specifically excludes private institutions from receiving the grant funding. So you get the designation, but not the grant funding. Nancy. Sorry, you're on mute, Nancy.
If I can just ask a quick question, is the hunger-free designation a designation by the state, or is it a broader designation?
It comes from MHEC, so
Okay.
it is a state designation. Yep.
Okay. I guess I'm just asking, never mind. Why
No.
would an institution put themselves through that if they can't apply for the grant funds? It sounds sort of odd.
I had the same. I think it's a fair question. I kind of was asking myself in my head, but I think it could be a way to just it's an expression of values. We've met the criteria to become a hunger-free campus. That's it's like saying we are LEED certified.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
I see Heather asked a similar question in the chat. All right. Any other questions on Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program? Seeing none, I will move on to the next one. So this is Community Eligibility Provision Expansion Program Establishment. This is a cross-filed bill. So far, we only have a hearing date on the Senate side, which is the 25th. And we're going over this today because our next meeting is going to be the 24th. So you wouldn't have enough time to submit testimony. So what this bill does is it establishes the Community Eligibility Provision Expansion Program within the Department of Education. The program is to provide funding to eligible schools that participate in the federal Community Eligibility Provision of Child Nutrition Programs. And the bill says that the state will pay the difference between the federal paid and free reimbursement rates. So the funding in the bill is intended to complement federal funding and to fill in that gap, not replace federal funds. The department is tasked in this bill to develop a process for county boards to participate in the program, to ensure funding is distributed based on the concentration of poverty in the schools within the counties, to consider things like geographic diversity for determining funding priorities. And then we have a large fiscal note here. So $10 million, a mandatory appropriation starting in fiscal year 2027. So that's going to be certainly a big lift in this bill. Any questions? Leslie from MSTE?
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment. We're looking at this bill. I don't have anything yet to say with regard to our analysis. Of course, we support anything that is going to expand and increase CEP. It's our understanding that the intent of this bill is to provide something that helps expand free meals short of universal meals legislation. We know that $10 million, though, is just a drop in the bucket. Universal meals was going to cost, oh goodness, I said I would get that number. We did a study. I'm gonna say in the neighborhood of $130 million, give or take a few million. But I do have an exact number if you press me. So anyway, $10 million helps, but doesn't go very far. So how it will be applied, it's up to the department now to figure out how to best utilize this $10 million. So we're working on that, but I don't have an answer yet.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Anne again?
Yeah, I don't see Maryland Hunger Solutions on here. We're working with them very closely on this bill. The Maryland Food Bank is. This bill is basically a pared down universal school meals. So I know the FSRC and Michael J. for his part was a strong leader on that bill. It had the fiscal note of I think anywhere from 130 to 180 million, depending on what kind of calculation, which is just not realistic for the state. So there's a coalition working on school meals bills that Maryland Food Bank, Maryland Hunger Solutions are a part of. That's basically, this is our answer to try and expand school meals in some sort of fashion. And $10 million was just kind of a start here. We'll see what we can do. Might get cut down, but it's a conversation starter. For sure. So this is that answer, the more realistic answer to try and get more school meals, no cost school meals into schools.
Thank you so much, Anne. Very helpful context.
And Ben, I'll just add, one of the sponsors, Delegate Julie Plakovich-Carr, her Chief of Staff, Matt Harrington, sent a message saying he wasn't able to join the call today, but just kind of following up on what Anne already shared for a bit of historical context, that this is the 2025 iteration of the Universal School Meals Bill that's supported by that Healthy School Meals for All coalition, and again, spearheaded with Maryland Hunger Solutions leadership. And so the decision was made that instead of introducing universal expansion, this is narrower and more targeted, just as Anne just shared. And so this is that $10 million grant program. But MSDE gets the capacity, the authority to determine how it's administered. And it could either support current CEP schools or help districts bring on new CEP schools. And Matt noted that it's drafted very flexibly to give lots of freedom to MSDE and the school districts to determine how best to use the funding.
Thank you, Heather. Other questions or comments on this bill? Annika.
Leslie, did you say that MSDE doesn't have like anything mapped out so far to determine like how many more LEAs would be eligible to receive the funding, or like how many more students would be able to receive free or reduced meals?
Right. We're in the process of doing that analysis now. So I have nothing to share with you yet, but it's forthcoming.
Any other questions?
I might have a question for Anne in case it's come up yet. I'm curious if school districts have weighed in yet in this approach, and kind of what questions or perspectives might have emerged in that.
Yeah, really great question. School nutrition directors, both the association of them and then individual ones, have weighed in and actually really helped craft this. And they're part of the reason that we made it so flexible for MSD and school districts to really implement it, because right, like Caroline County is not the same as Montgomery County and all that good stuff. We have not gotten in touch with individual districts or MABE, like boards of education or anything like that as of yet. But since the bills have dropped, obviously they're going to be a next conversation. So happy to update whenever that happens.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. And I'll certainly share this with Matt too. And I know a lot of our food councils are represented on the coalition already, but I think the FSRC can be a helpful mechanism for sharing information with local communities. So if there's any, communication support that can be offered by our committee to inform the process, just let us know.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'll get in touch with Hunger Solutions after this and tell them that basically just what you said. Thanks.
All right. Anything else on this bill? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to the next one, the on-farm home processing license revenue limit prohibition bill. Introduced in the Senate as Senate Bill 481. Hearing is next week on the 19th. So this defines on-farm home processing license as a license issued to an individual who owns a farm to process food in a home or domestic kitchen located on the individual's farm. So it's not like mass production, it's for use on the individual farm. This bill would prohibit the Department of Health from limiting the amount of revenue the holder of an on-farm home processing license may derive from food processed in accordance with the license. The current revenue limit, which would be repealed through MDH regulation, which would be repealed in this bill, is $40,000. So that is the current revenue limit. That has been designated through MDH regulation. So there's an uncodified portion of this bill that says that MDH would be instructed to repeal this revenue limit if this bill were to pass. Rachel, good to see you again, Rachel.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. And so Senator Gallion reached out to MDA to chat about this one, and we're currently in the process of coordinating with the Department of Health, certainly for the purposes of helping agritourism businesses. MDA on our own would be okay with increasing the cap or removing the cap. However, the health department is not exactly okay with that. And we understand the concerns that they've raised as well. They just don't want on-farm or in-home businesses to be producing so much revenue that at this point they're operating like a restaurant or other storefront, and they believe should be licensed as such. So we're currently working with them on possible amendments. One of those amendments would be to remove meat and cheese from the on-farm home processing license. And the main reason for that is that by and large, meat and cheese, the raw product, are sent off-site and processed. So the milk is sent off-site and then turned into cheese, or it's processed as ice cream. And then sent back so that it can be sold and stored on farm. Meat and cheese, however, meat and cheese are not produced on farm the majority of the time. And so what we've asked is for them to consider removing meat and cheese and then making the cap the same as it is for cottage food, which is $50,000 in revenue, or increasing the cap to at least $100,000. Even if they do keep meat and cheese in there. So those are the things that are currently being considered by the health department as of last Thursday when we met with them. And so we're all kind of coordinating to come to an agreement to go back to the sponsors on. So we certainly believe the revenue cap should be increased. And the Senator Gallion particularly knows that. And so they're trying to work with us to amend that.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Rachel. Annika?
Hey, Rachel, I was curious, do you happen to know how many farmers would benefit from having this cap increase, or has MDA done any outreach with farmers who are maybe close to that threshold? I'm also curious if you know why $40,000 was selected in the first place, especially if that's not what cottage law is.
Sure. I'll start with the latter. I don't know why 40,000 was selected. I will say cottage food, I think, was just increased maybe last year. And so, oh, I see Mark is on. I was about to say that's a marketing question as far as the numbers, but Mark Powell from our team is on the call. So I may throw that question to Mark. I don't know if he heard the beginning part of the question.
Sorry, I was disconnected and just got back. What's the question?
Well, I was asking if we know how many farmers would benefit in Maryland approximately would benefit from this threshold increase, and also if you happen to know why the $40,000 cap was established in the first place, if the cottage food law is so much higher.
I don't know the exact number. I can, we can find that out for you. I recall the cap was on there at the health department was, I think, somewhat concerned at that time, which has been a while, that it would, grow into some kind of major business, and they wouldn't, if it goes beyond a certain point, it would need more oversight from the health department. So I don't know if anybody's on this call from the health department, but they would know better.
Any other questions or comments on the on-farm home processing license bill? Okay, with it. Oh.
Sorry, Ben. I'm just curious if this has any intersection. I know, Rachel, you said, you made a reference to agritourism, and I'm only familiar with county kind of farm stay rules, but does this apply for something like this, or is this specifically for open to the public retail food access?
Sure. No, so it would apply to, so some of the businesses, let's say in Montgomery County, that you're referencing, that have farm stays included as part of what they offer as an agritourism business. Let's say you are okay, well, it's not in Montgomery County, but there's a dairy creamery in Washington County, right, where they raise cattle, they milk cows, their products are then sent off to be processed for cheese and milk, and then they have a storefront. They have a storefront there where you can purchase their dairy products, and they're obviously selling products from other local vendors, but they're also offering farm stays. So with the current on-farm home processing license, I'm not sure which businesses have this license and which ones don't, but let's say the business I'm talking about had an on-farm home processing license because they also sell ice cream. They also sell ice cream made from their milk. And so let's say you had an on-farm home processing license that allowed you to take a raw product, add some sort of value to it, because they also sell jams and jellies, right? The current cap is that your revenue coming directly from those processed products cannot be more than $40,000 annually. But again, if you add meat and cheese in there, it automatically, meat and cheese are high value products, right? They cost more to be processed. And so obviously by the time it gets back to the farm, the farmer is then charging, there's a price increase. You're going to pay more for meat that you buy from a farm store because it costs them quite a bit to have it processed. And so that's automatically going to take them over the current revenue cap for this particular license, just because of meat particularly. And so if you remove meat and cheese from the cap, since they're not even processed, they're sent to a slaughterhouse or processing facility elsewhere, where people have to put in their order a year in advance to say, I'm going to send you 7 head of cattle next July, and I want them processed. And they basically have to raise their livestock based on the orders that they send in advance, because there are so few meat processing facilities in our region, and particularly in the state. So most folks are sending their livestock to Northern Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, or Delaware to be processed. So the meat's not being processed on the farm. However, it's currently included in this revenue cap that MDH has set, which is why Senator Gallion is looking to just prohibit it, remove the cap altogether to allow farm businesses to be more profitable. So it wouldn't include the farm stays. It's primarily supposed to be for the revenue that is generated from those food products that are processed on farm.
Nancy? Nancy?
So I guess my question is, Rachel, I followed that. Thank you for explaining all of that. But it seems very odd to me that the revenue definition isn't connected to what you were talking, like the food exactly that you're talking about, the food process, because I'm looking at Heather's face and I'm sitting there thinking, is that just going to remove the revenue limit entirely? You said if they're doing an agritourism or whatever. I mean, it's just, I'm trying to understand it in my mind, how the different licenses and the different revenue amounts intersect. I would think it'd be really confusing for a farmer, and they could find themselves very quickly
Sure. If I can,
doing something they
Oh.
shouldn't be doing.
I was gonna say if I could share my screen for a moment, but I'll just read it, right? So if you pull up the legislation for SB 41, it specifically states that this only pertains to revenue that is generated directly from the food. So it says in this section, on-farm home processing license means a license issued to an individual who owns a farm to process food in a home or domestic kitchen located on the individual's farm. The department may not limit the amount of revenue the holder of an on-farm home processing license may derive from food processed under the license. So it's not about whatever else is happening on the farm or with that particular business. It is specifically about this particular license, not it as written, it removes the cap to basically say you can't prohibit or cap the amount of revenue that can be brought in, or excuse me, that can be made by the business by any food that they process. So if you are an orchard owner, you grow apples and then you make your own applesauce, you make your own apple pies. Well, currently the cap is $40,000 is the most revenue you can make off of those products on your farm per year, which is fine maybe if it's apple pies, right? But because meat and cheese are included in this current license, then folks who are trying to sell their meat and cheese products on their farm, in addition to, let's say, apple pies, are severely limited. And so that's the point. So it wouldn't impact any of the other operations that happen on that farm or at that agritourism business. But the current cap is $40,000.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
You're welcome.
Further questions on that bill? All right, let's move on to some oyster shucking. So this bill would increase the amount from $10,000 to $25,000 that the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, or MARBIDCO, which is a quasi-public economic development organization, which is chartered by the state, may loan per seasonal full-time job projected to be created or retained under the Maryland Oyster Shucking House Loan Fund. So that's one provision of the bill. The second key provision is that this reduces the number of years from 5 to 3 that a person must have been a licensed seafood dealer in order to be eligible to receive loans under this program. Everything else about the program remains unchanged. It just increases the amount that MARBIDCO can provide for seasonal full-time jobs for oyster shucking and reduces the requirements from 5 years to 3 years for which a person must have been a licensed seafood dealer. Questions?
And this is Stacy. I'm here. If you have any questions, I can give you a background too, if you'd like that.
Stacy, has there been much engagement around this bill, or any questions that have come up in other spaces that our members might be?
Sure. So
about to?
The original bill that created this goes back to 2022, and it was part of like a large bill that was to help replenish oysters in the Chesapeake Bay, and then it created this loan program from our big co to administer. What's different about this than other loan programs is the amount that you can borrow is based on these jobs. So it's not really based on like, you might need to borrow 100,000, but if you're only adding 2 new jobs, you can only borrow 50,000. So last year they put in a bill that said, because that's kind of hard for these small businesses to meet. So they put in a bill that then created these seasonal full-time jobs. And if you're creating those, then you could get 10,000. But it really hasn't moved the needle in getting more of these smaller entities to be able to qualify. So this bill is basically streamlining it to say that if you're creating full-time or seasonal full-time or retaining those jobs, then it's 25,000 per job. And we've only really approved one loan for 200,000 for a project in Dorchester County, and we've had other calls and interest, but again, that job creation and retention is hard to meet. And then the other thing is they had to hold a seafood dealer license for 5 years. By reducing it to 3 years, again, we're trying to get to make it easier for applicants to apply. So that's really what the purpose is to make the program easier for people that are interested to be able to qualify.
Thank you so much, Stacy.
Mhm.
House hearing is on Wednesday. So if anybody's interested in submitting testimony, you'd have to do that today. Senate hearing is not until March 4th. Any additional questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to the last bill that we will cover in today's session. This is House Bill 907, property tax credits for urban agricultural property alterations. So it removes a current requirement that urban agricultural property be at least 1/8 of an acre and not more than 5, and that the land must be located in a priority funding area. Adds that land eligible under this program must not be assessed as agricultural land as it's defined in the Maryland Code. It adds indoor and outdoor crop production, the production of value-added agricultural products, beekeeping, raising livestock, composting, pollinator habitat creation, and maintenance, and agricultural education, tourism activities to the broad definition of what a purpose of urban agriculture can be under this section of the code. It allows the jurisdiction granting the tax credit the ability to terminate the tax credit if the jurisdiction provides the public with notice 1 year in advance. It allows opportunities for comments and appeals, and it gives jurisdictions the ability to prioritize renewals of the credit based on their own priorities. This has a hearing. There's no Senate crossfile. The hearing in the House on this is next week, the 18th. Rachel.
Thanks, Ben. The Department of Agriculture is going to support this. This is something that, particularly in Prince George's County, we've gotten a lot of feedback about it in the past couple of years, where there were local zoning laws that basically had a definition of urban agriculture that conflicted with the state definition. And there were plenty of people who felt like they should have qualified for the tax credit. And it was so bad that the county's Department of Agricultural Development was trying to help, but couldn't, their hands were pretty much tied. And so originally Delegate Lehman, a previous county councilwoman for Prince George's, was going to look to sponsor this, but she may have punted this to Delegate Roberson instead. And so this change in the definition will make it easier for more farmers across Maryland, not just Prince George's, who have an urban farm, whether it's a little small lot, or it's several raised garden beds that are stacked somehow. It's just basically going to make more people eligible for that tax credit.
Annika?
Do we know how much the tax credit can be? It looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like it's on a case by case basis at the local jurisdiction level. Do we know like what it could be, or high and low amounts?
I don't know that yet. I did reach out to the comptroller's office for those figures, and they're working to get me that information. But it is, each county sets their own rate for what the tax credit would be. And so, in addition to this language, and, Ben kind of explained it, it basically says the jurisdiction can terminate that tax credit, but they do have to notify the landowner within a year. But right now, because it's at the discretion of each county, it's different in every county. And so I'm waiting for some information from the comptroller's office to let me know exactly how much revenue is essentially lost to the state for the tax credit on an annual basis, based on how many people are utilizing the tax credit currently across the state, and how many we anticipate would potentially benefit from it should it pass.
Just to briefly add to what you were saying, Rachel, the current language in the statute is that the mayor and city council of Baltimore City, or the governing body of a county or municipality, may provide by law for the amount of the tax credit under this program and any additional eligibility requirements, along with regulations and procedures. So it's broad control to local governments.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Shuffle, Montgomery County. This is enabling legislation. So other counties have done this already. This is providing the framework. And like you just said, Ben, it's up to the jurisdictions to say this is what we want. Montgomery County has an urban ag tax credit. If people qualify, they get 80% reduction in their county's property tax, which is pretty damn substantial and a pretty big incentive to do this.
Any further questions on this legislation? Before I go check whether my backyard garden qualifies and I can get a 80% reduction in my property taxes. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, Ben, I think that was actually something that I was thinking about with the removal of the lower limit. I understand that it sort of defers to the local jurisdictions to determine, and Mike will know has a better memory than I do with what it is in Montgomery County, but there is, a threshold. I'm curious if that, if it felt like an eighth of an acre there were a lot that were below that. And I see Dr. Range has her hand up. Yeah.
Nope, Dr. Range? On mute. Nope, okay.
Hi, this is Mike again. When this bill was proposed in Montgomery County, we had to do an analysis of all properties that could theoretically take advantage of this. And in Montgomery County, the minimum lot size is a half acre. The reason why a half acre was the minimum is a previous version of what was proposed for this bill. The tax impact would have been something to the effect of like $500 million lost to the county. And that's obviously not a great recipe for successful government. So we had to structure in a way that people could take advantage of it, but it wouldn't be such a detriment to overall county operations.
Hi, this is Camille. Sorry, I had audio issues before. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. Yep. As far as this is definitely something in Prince George's County. we have been pushing. So for us, I kind of want to go back to Heather's point about like the threshold. I don't have it in front of me, but there is a requirement as far as the amount of produce product that you have to actually both like sell and also donate. So that's something that our actual representative or farmer from Fat Cardinal Farms in Bowie, Maryland, will speak to in their testimony. It's also about the amount of product that they're able to also donate. So they're tracking how much they're actually selling at the farm as well as donation. And that is what's also qualifying them. So it's not just you having the actual farm, right? It's about you also producing and also, like I said, donating. I'm not sure again on those actual numbers. Maybe that's also what varies from county to county. But something that I also have learned in catching up to speed with this property tax credit. So hopefully that's helpful. But yes, myself, I'll be testifying as well as, like I said, a Fat Cardinal Farm and others from Prince George's County. We're also trying to make sure we're trying to find someone who tried to apply maybe in the past, and this is ultimately a limitation for them as well. So yeah, we'd love to connect more, but been working with Kim Rush Lynch as well in the Soil Conservation District here in Prince George's County.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, moving on. Quickly, just to identify, we have some bills that we talked about already where the cross-file bills have hearings. So the Solid Waste Disposal Surcharge and Wasted Food Reduction Diversion Fund bill has a hearing in the Senate tomorrow at 1 p.m. Yes.
Just going back to that one, Dr. Lansing shared that she will be testifying at the Senate hearing as well on behalf of the FSRC for that wasted food diversion bill.
Fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Heather.
And I don't know if that's also true for the Food Forests and Foraging bill, which also has a hearing in the Senate tomorrow at 1 p.m. I think I saw
No.
not at that one. Okay.
The council didn't submit testimony for that one.
Gotcha. Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act, which we talked about last week. The hearing for that is tomorrow in the Senate. Hearing tomorrow on a bill we talked about a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, this is a hearing that's coming from the House. We talked about the Senate version of the bill. The House cross-file has a hearing tomorrow. This is Anne Arundel County property tax credits for supermarkets. A few updates from hearings on bills that we have discussed. We had a bunch of probably several members who are on this call today who are present at a hearing for Senate Bill 353, the proposed food deserts work group. Does anybody on the call want to discuss what happened at that hearing? Or who was at that hearing or has any comments on it? Then I will just say that we had a couple of individuals testify in support, including the sponsor, and a comment that Senator Salling in the sponsor testimony said that he believed that FSRC wanted to assist in this project. I will leave it at that. Okay. We had a hearing for the procurement bill. This is a hearing in the House. This is the MSDE procurement bill for local food purchasing. The sponsor of this bill on the House side, Delegate Charkoudian, testified that she has amendments prepared. Not that the amendments wouldn't change the core of the bill, but just some conforming amendments. Probably several people on this call testified in support of this bill, at least with amendments. Maryland Farm Bureau did, Capital Area Food Bank did. There was a question about concerns from the fiscal and policy note that I believe we discussed on our briefing about how it could incentivize purchases from farms or food producers in other states for schools that are in close proximity to the border. And there was a question as to whether all of the farmers in the Nutrient program are Maryland farmers. So that is basically what happened at that House hearing. Anybody have any questions on any of these? All right. We had a hearing in the House on the Department of Agriculture, Maryland Agricultural Commission, and Young Farmers Bill. Rachel testified at that hearing. She recommended a technical amendment specifying that a representative from the new Young Farmers Committee, who sits on the Agricultural Commission, would serve on the board, but otherwise testify in support. And there was a question as to whether this bill would reduce the numbers of members on the commission, and the answer is it would not. It simply alters the membership. And there was no testimony in opposition. The Senate version of this bill, by the way, received a favorable committee report. So this bill is headed to the Senate floor shortly. Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program. There was a hearing in the House. No questions or opposition, just testimony from the sponsor. Senate hearing on this bill coming up. Maryland Farms and Families Fund bill that we discussed. A couple of updates. We got a favorable committee report in the Senate, so this is also headed to the Senate floor. Rachel again testified at this bill last week on the 5th. There was a desire potentially to submit a technical amendment clarifying that the definition of a person includes a government entity, and then a question about timeline in terms of distributing funds under this bill, but no testimony in opposition. Anything to add to this, Rachel, in particular? I know you were at these hearings and testified. Is there anything worth noting that I'm missing here?
Nope, nothing additional. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Here's a list of bills with upcoming hearings, not on bills, priority bills that we've talked about on these calls, but things that may be of interest to some or many of you. And again, these are available on our bill calendar. Yes, Annika?
Sorry, I'm chiming in a lot today. I wanted to highlight the food supplements benefits student eligibility bill. The hearing was announced, I think, over the weekend maybe, but I thought that might be one of interest to the council if anyone wanted to submit testimony. The hearing is on the 18th. I put it in the chat.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions on upcoming hearings? Only thing I want to say on the budget, there's no legislative update. The President of the Senate, Senator Ferguson, gave a pretty sobering, I think it was just a media briefing on Friday, talking about how, based on actions at the federal level, the budget situation seems to be getting worse, not better, particularly if some of these preliminary stays on federal decisions are lifted. So things like the cap on indirect costs for grant funding through NIH would have a huge impact on Maryland institutions. And these are the types of things that President Ferguson was talking about. So we already have a pretty significant budget shortfall, and it's going to continue to be very challenging based on what's happening at the federal government. And Governor Moore mentioned basically the same thing in his State of the State address last week. All right. Annika?
Oh, I just had kind of a question for the audience, but keep going, Ben.
No, go ahead.
Well, so it was interesting to hear from Dr. Range about what Prince George's Food Equity Council is providing testimony for. And I'm curious if audience members have additional bills that they feel like we should be discussing, or things that their organizations are doing with advocacy that they would want to discuss with the Communication and Coordination Committee, or raise awareness about. It can be food for thought too. Never mind. Feel free always to email the council address if you want to share. Dr. Range, go ahead.
No, Annika, I think it's a good question. I'm just trying to chew and listen at the same time. But I do think that there could be, I know that Maryland Hunger Solution isn't on the call, but I think that there could just be a good concerted effort to just make sure the CEP expansion program is supported by as many testimonies as possible. We are starting to do, support more school food nutrition programs, or have been within the county. And so this is just one, I think, for us to also be intentional about just making sure we're requesting testimony to support during this time. I know a lot of our focus has been on the urban property tax, but I appreciate this call. It's definitely just giving some good ideas. So thanks.
Oh, Anne.
Hi, thanks. Another bill that was just heard last week was HB 483, which is an income tax credit for venison donations to food assistance organizations. It was put in by Delegate Ziegler. It's only in the House, but it's part of kind of a concerted effort from like the Maryland Farm Bureau and some other farmers to try and tackle the deer issue, which is eating a lot of, well, I'm not a farmer, but people on here are, right, really eating crops, damaging farmland and things like that. And the Maryland Food Bank testified in support of it, not only from the donation side, but also because we have so many farm partners throughout the state that it really does turn into a local food system issue, this deer overpopulation problem. So just flagging that one as well.
Thank you so much, Anne. And that's actually, for those of you who were on these calls during the last session, I think we spent some time talking about the venison donation bill. But my understanding is you get a tax credit for processing venison for the purpose of donation. So it's a food insecurity fix, and it's also a culling the deer population. So thank you, Anne. Any other questions? Last thing on important dates, nothing really for a while. Final date for introduction of bills without suspension of the rules is March 3rd. We're about 5 weeks away from crossover date, so we'll just keep an eye on which of the bills we've talked about make it onto the floors of their respective chambers and crossover prior to the 17th. We're about 2 months away from Sine Die on April 7th. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Heather and Annika.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Ben, for all of that research and expertise, which is definitely keeping us all afloat during a very busy season. I'll just reiterate what I shared in the chat box, that where we won't be meeting for 2 weeks, definitely encourage everybody to take a spin through the tracker, not the priority bills tabs, because those really cover the ones that we have collectively followed in these meetings, but the lists on I think the third and fourth tabs of the tracker, which are the ones that we have identified as being potentially of interest to all of you here. And there's definitely some that I think will be. So encourage you to take a look at those so that you can follow on your own at home until we reconnect on the 24th. So that is just a little bit of homework assignment for myself and anybody else here on the call who's interested too. But thank you all so much for being here, and definitely encourage in our little bit of a break as a group to continue the offline correspondence. If there is work that you are doing that's relevant to the General Assembly session that you want to highlight for fellow members of the food system community, please pass those along to Annika or me or Nancy or Ben. But really look forward to reconnecting later this month. And thanks again for your time today. Oh, Summer's got a hand.
That was an accident.
High five. That's what it was.
I was going to say, that was a last second addition there, Summer.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Any
guys.
closing words, Annika?
No, just thanks, everyone. And I put the council's email address in the chat.
Great. All right. Well, it's terrific to see everyone. Stay warm and safe out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.